Human rights agencies to put pressure on government to address farm murders. In a letter to international organizations, the DA laments farm murders and says South Africa has become increasingly violent. For more on this, I'm joined by Diane Barnard, the DA's spokesperson for state security. Diane, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Now, this is not the first time that you are taking action against farm attacks and murders. Earlier in the year, you were lobbying the government to have farm murders declared as a hate crime. How far is that process? And tell us a bit more about the position that you are taking as a party on this matter.
Well, we launched a multi-pronged attack, as it were, campaign in June. And we had the debate in Parliament on a matter of public importance. There's petitions, work with agricultural unions, reports on the tortures and murders, and the establishment of the court watching briefs, which means we are there to assist every survivor through the police processes and the court processes. The list goes on and on. So there were 16 points that we've been focusing on, and yet when we asked the Minister of Police for the re-establishment of the rural safety units, he seemed to agree, although it's always difficult with him. He tends to say one thing in the positive and then repeat it in the negative. So it's always a bit tricky. But when the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police was asked to call him to give the details, the dates, the costs, she casually said, we'll look into it sometime next year. Now, this while there are 50 attacks every month on our farms, with farmers and farm workers being tortured and murdered. And that tired old trope that the only farmers who are killed are white farmers is repeated by the likes of the EFF, who seem to celebrate on social media whenever this happens. But think of 80-year-old Mapozana Kumalo, who last Tuesday was tied to a tree and shot and left there to die while checking on his son's cattle and sheep near Muden in KZN. Now, this man went out of his way to help others. He spent his life working with livestock, and the community of Mooi River now in KwaZulu-Natal is devastated. So it takes 5 years, says the research, for a community to recover from the murder of a farmer and all the work streams that go out of the farm, into the farm, the employment, and that is destroyed by the murderers. So I frankly no longer think there is the political appetite to assist our rural community. It's a strategic asset. It feeds South Africans. So indeed, I wrote to 10 global human rights agencies to put pressure on the government to address this matter.
Now, you speak of the EFF, but you've also accused the governing party, the ANC, of taking a denialist stance, saying South Africa's agriculture sector continues to be threatened by what you've termed a volatile security situation. Speak to us about this.
Well, the president in 2018 sat on camera in New York and denied that there were any farmers being murdered in South Africa. There were no white farmers being murdered in South Africa. He denied it on camera. And that very year, there were some 40 killed. And you know full well, I'm sure you've read about and seen the horrific photos of the sorts of tortures that go on in some instances for 3 days and 3 nights, as slowly but surely the families are tortured to death. I'm not going to go into the horrors of that, but it's medieval type torture that is being conducted. Nowadays, more and more often, I'm hearing that people are tortured to death, and then the people who've done this to them leave without so much as taking a cell phone. So there are very strange things going on. I don't know what's behind it, but it has to be dealt with. And if it means that international agencies, these are renowned agencies, top human rights agencies, are going to bring pressure to bear on the ANC, so be it.
The president has previously gone on to explain himself or rectify the stance. So that video was misaccrued, if you would say. What's your response to that?
Well, that's baloney. He says categorically there are no farmers being killed in South Africa.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid I don't believe what he said. He's trying to get himself out of a difficult situation by swinging round and about, but it's not true. We've all seen the video. We all know what he said.
All right, let's move along now. Have you actually gone on the ground to hear what the situation is on farms? And so far, what have you taken from these interactions, if you have actually done this groundwork?
Of course, I've been traveling with my colleague, who's the Shadow Minister of Agriculture, Annette Steyn, for 3 or 4 years now. But certainly, I've been speaking out about farm attacks since 2006, and my predecessor was doing that before then. But when we finally took the decision that we had to do something more dramatic, and that was workshopped. We now have units in every province in the country, and we all work together as a unit to try and tackle this most terrible and difficult situation. Because every time there is an attack on a farm, the work on that farm is set back by so many years. People often just pack their bags, the survivors pack their bags, they just walk out, they just leave. And that's another farm that just is left abandoned. So we have met dozens and dozens and dozens of farmers in groups individually. We send groups to the families of survivors. We are working with them day and night, and people know who to come to if they want assistance. It's very, very scary for some people to go into a police station, because police are not the most favored people in this country. It's very scary for them to go to court. And we had one extraordinary success recently where a DA councillor who had been gang raped and attacked and brutalized had waited for 5.5 years, and the matter still had not come to court. And thankfully, with the likes of Advocate Glynis Breitenbach, we caused enough pressure that matter has now been resolved, and that person is in jail for life. So that is the outcome we're looking for. We're trying to succeed at that level, but we need ANC buy-in, we need government buy-in, and that's not happening. Yeah. So hence I've now called on others to assist.
But have you actually had a chance to also speak on the people who work on these farms? I mean, the EFF has come out to, yes, as an example, has come out to speak about serious abuses of workers, mentioning the likes of ZZ2 out in Limpopo, where they say these workers, mostly black workers, are living in squalor conditions, if one may say.
You know, I of course, we speak to farmers of every sort. If you imagine that farmers are only white, we had an Indian woman have her throat slit in KZN. We've had coloured farmers murdered. We've had farmers of every kind murdered, attacked, tortured. So if there is a specific farm where there are specific abuses, then that must be reported to the relevant bodies. I will never damn an entire community because there is one person who is perhaps breaking the law. They must now face the might of the law. Yeah. But farmers treasure their workers. They know that farm managers and experienced farm workers are worth their weight in gold. And so they don't want them poached by another farmer. And so they literally make sure that their lives are extremely comfortable. So if there is someone who's abusing farmers or abusing foreigners when they come into the country, that must be dealt with by the law, by the police.
Okay, let's now move to speak of the action that you are currently taking. Tell us about some of these groups that you have written to, and what are you asking them to do?
Well, these organizations have all been asked to pressure the government to act. We're also asking them, because there's been zero response by government, to assist in conducting up-to-date research, because currently we're looking at research that's some 17 or 18 years old. It's totally useless. And we need up-to-date research, as does any crime-fighting entity, in order to fully understand the actual issue. So we're asking these experts to look at possible litigation measures that will put pressure on the South African government to force them to focus on the issues that they're so carefully ignoring. And we've identified them because they are recognized as principled, professional, and non-partisan organizations. And that hopefully will create a snowball effect of global public awareness. In the process, it will put pressure on the government and wake up our domestic human rights organizations in the hopes that they will also pay attention to the issue of rural tortures and abuse and rapes and murders.
Now, you asked that pressure be brought.
Sure you know them.
You asked that pressure be brought from every possible angle. What do you mean by this?
Well, we're talking, just to list a few. I'm sure you know Amnesty International and civil rights defenders, Human Rights Without Frontiers. There's a list of them of 10. But the government has, for some reason, a total blind spot when it comes to protecting our strategic asset that produces the food, the very food we eat. We cannot become a country that is forced to import the majority of our food. We can't afford it. We are busy, as you know, cutting back on the budgets for every single department, including the police, of all things. The budgets are being cut because the money has been looted. We don't have the money to feed South Africans. We need to be able to produce our own food. And if this goes on, the numbers of commercial farmers are dwindling. We're in a situation where we will be like Zimbabwe. And the Zimbabweans can run here to get a job. Where will South Africans run? We have to fix this, and we have to fix it. It is crucial that the situation is dealt with. And hopefully, when the global spotlight starts aiming at South Africa, instead of simply buying the "oh, it's not happening" story, then the pressure will be brought to bear. I've had some interesting responses so far, but I will do a follow-up in due course with the responses from all of these entities.
Speaking about responses, have you received any correspondence yet to this action that you're taking?
Yes, I don't want to go into them, but I am receiving responses. I'm being asked for a lot more information. I'm being asked even to send proof that these murders are happening, and one just has to go onto any website and you will see the photographs and the responses. You will see what a murder site looks like. And I will be sending those and saying, this is what happened to this 80-year-old and this 70-year-old and this 2-year-old and this 3-month-old. And then perhaps people will start focusing. People keep on saying that I want policing taken away from Soweto or from another area. It's absolute nonsense. I want rural people to have the same access to safety and security as anyone in a city does. And if you are living in a city, you can phone the police, you can phone your private security company, and they're at your house in a matter of minutes. In a rural area, you are on your own. No one will come to help. Maybe your neighbors will. If you have a good system and good neighborhood watch system set up, you will pray that your neighbors will get there in time. And frequently they come en masse to come and assist because they know the next time it will be their turn to be attacked. So people are having to protect themselves. And this can't go on. It just cannot go on that people are. I've heard of farmers who, they get home at night, they put a gun on their hip, their wife carries a gun around, they sleep with a gun next to their bed. What kind of life is that? That you are growing the food that people eat and you have to do it with a gun strapped to your hip. It's wrong. It should not be happening in South Africa today. And this is just one of the many ways that I hope we will bring enough pressure onto the government to focus and start taking care of its citizens who don't happen to live in a town.
Well, Diane, we'll be speaking soon again to get just a response on the kind of action that's going to be taken going forward. That's, of course, the DA appealing to global human rights agencies to put pressure on government to address farm murders.